You might not have thought much about it, but there's a difference between planning and a plan. Lenny Layman is president of the Wyoming All Hazards Association, and he thinks a lot about just that kind of thing. I'm Steve Peck of Wyoming PBS. This is Wyoming Chronicle. You are the head of an organization that has a fun acronym, WAHA, W-A-H-A. What does that stand for?
It's kind of fun to say. It's the Wyoming All Hazards Association.
So it's generally under the big umbrella of emergency management.
Correct.
Fair enough?
Correct, yes.
And you, as your day job, so to speak, are an emergency management coordinator for Carbon County.
I am, yes, for the last 6 years.
Yeah. What's WAHA compared to a local emergency management official?
Well, WAHA is an organization that was originally founded way before my time in Wyoming, back in 1968. Wow. What WAHA is now is an organization of members that include any preparedness or emergency management coordinator from really any subject matter expertise, public health, fire departments, law enforcement are allowed to be members of WAHA, but the vision is from emergency management coordinators' perspective.
Wyoming already has an Office of Emergency Management. Homeland Security has a presence in Wyoming. There are fire departments and sheriff's departments and law enforcement departments all have some emergency training. There are nonprofits that do emergency work sometimes. So with all this emergency response, why do we need WAHA?
Well, WAHA is the Association of Emergency Managers. Typically, you don't see us, you don't maybe necessarily hear about us, but we're behind the scenes supporting and coordinating all the efforts that is naturally seen on the front line: the fire, the police, the EMS.
You don't drive a squad car.
I do not.
You don't ride the fire engine.
Correct.
You don't drive the ambulance.
Correct.
But when they need to, for example, if all three of those things need to be deployed at once, chances are the kind of planning and coordination that you do comes into play there.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if we have let's just say a simple house fire, typically fire goes out and does what they do best, put water on the hot stuff, and emergency management is typically not involved. Yeah. If there's a bad actor, law enforcement gets involved and goes out and arrests the bad actor. If there's an accident, EMS goes out and helps that patient victim. But when fire is needed and law enforcement is needed, and it's a multi-agency response, that's typically when emergency management gets activated to provide the behind-the-scenes support and coordination of those efforts.
And ideally, the things that are being implemented and put into place then are the result of having thought about it beforehand and getting people together and deciding what ought to be done. And this brings me to this quote that you told me right before we came on camera from, was it President or General Eisenhower at that time? Or
yes.
Tell me what that was. Paraphrase it as best you can.
Yes, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable.
Okay, I don't know how many viewers have made that distinction for themselves, but
right.
You have, and he did.
For
What's
sure.
the difference between plans and planning?
So you've always heard that it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's
okay.
The same thing in developing plans. The best laid plans are not a 3-ring binder that ends up on a shelf behind, the town clerk or the city manager. The best laid plans are the plans that take time to produce, where you're putting emergency management is helping facilitate to put the right people around the table, helping facilitate the conversations, maybe first responders meeting each other for the very first time. And we call that the blue sky planning. We're planning things in the blue sky. And then when the incident comes, you may already know that responder that you're going to be responding with. And that responder has your back, and that responder may help you come home safely. So if we can have those responders meet, have good, robust conversations in the blue sky around a table, and talking about preparedness and how we can better work together, we do definitely want to end up with a written plan that ends up on a shelf that we can reference. But the overarching success of a good plan is the relationships that were built in that planning process and the robustness of people working together, not for the first time in a crisis, but they've known each other through those planning processes.
So it's probably safe then to say that the emergency that you don't want is not having planned.
Correct.
Gosh, here's this big problem. If only we'd thought about it and coordinated and talked about it a little bit
Correct.
firsthand. And
Yeah.
a big part of what WAHA is doing is make sure that that part of it gets done.
It is, and I think it's worth saying that as the emergency management coordinator for Carbon County, we have 23 counties in Wyoming.
Yeah.
The top emergency management coordinator out of each of the counties have 2 lines of direct report. We report to the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, and we're appointed by the governor. And then we also report to our local chain of command, and that's a little bit different across the 23
You
counties.
mentioned that, and that's an
Yeah,
interesting part of at least the job, the challenge.
it is.
Someone who do you report to in your county, for example, locally?
So in Carbon, I'm blessed to report to the Carbon County Board of Commissioners. It's a board of 5.
Right.
So I have 2 what they call liaisons that I kind of do my day-to-day stuff. If I need to take a day off, I work through my liaisons. But then in crisis or event planning, it's really all 5 that I try and work with a close relationship with. So I have 5 bosses.
So all 23 counties in Wyoming have county commissioners, but not every emergency management coordinator in every county reports to the commissioners. In some counties, it's somebody else.
It is, yep.
For example,
Some of our counties report to the county sheriff. Some of our EMs report to fire agencies within that county. And it's a matter of personal choice, professional choice, and the way they've done things for a period of time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. I just feel honored that in Carbon I get to report to the Board of County Commissioners and build that relationship so that when crisis hits, I work with them to set policy, open up funding channels, continuity of operations, so I'm tied in right at that highest level.
is there some benefit as you see it, based on your experience of having that reporting done to an elected body at least, or is that, how important is that, do you think?
Well, for me, I think it's direly important because that's the county that I'm in.
Yeah.
But across the state, I see great work being done in all 23 counties, regardless of the report. And what we like to say in emergency management, it's really all about relationship.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have any authority. Some emergency management coordinators have direct reports. They have a deputy or an assistant. I am a department of 1. But outside of those direct reports, we can't tell the sheriff's department to do anything and fire to do anything. But it's all about relationships.
Right.
It's all about influence and trying to show by experience and show by example that maybe there's a better way or a different way.
So that fire chief who's out there on the fire lines maybe with a megaphone or something, or with a hose, he knows Lenny is there as a resource, someone that he's talked to, and you can work together in a way that can be absolutely vital.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If you think about it, if we're talking on a fire line, if we have a big wildfire, our wildland and firefighters are the professionals. And if you've heard of what's called incident command system, it's a structure, and there's always an IC, an incident commander, and then there's always operations. And operations are the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
They're the fire line crews, the water drops, the sheriff's department doing evacuations. But back in what we call the Emergency Operations Center, emergency managers can support and coordinate a larger working force that takes care of potentially all the logistics that need to be done, all the planning, all the finance, public information, liaisoning, that doesn't necessarily need to be done at the incident command post. It can be better served back at a location that has dedicated power, good comms, reliable communications, that we can take care of all those behind the scenes efforts.
I'm reminded of the modern day proverb that I think I first heard in a movie, which is, hope is not a plan.
Correct.
You've probably seen some occasions where a little bit of better planning might have made for a better outcome, right?
For sure. And it's always a delicate dance that we play in emergency management, because after an event, there's a thing that sometimes we help facilitate, and it's called an AAR, an after action review. And there's also a process called an IP, an improvement plan. And I like to say that a after action review without an improvement plan, an AAR without an IP, is like a sports car without tires. It looks really good, but it really isn't going to go anywhere. So what we do is, in those after action reviews, we take those lessons learned, and in a crisis, we make the assumption that everybody responded with the right intentions and responded to the best of their ability. So we're not looking to say who did something wrong, but what we're looking for in those AARs, IPs, is what processes may not have been the best processes, and how can we improve processes. And then what gets missed a lot of times is what went well. And sometimes something went really well, possibly by fluke, possibly it wasn't part of an SOG, a standard operating guideline or a standing operating principle, and somebody just intuitively knew to do that. Well, what we want to do in emergency management is capture that best practice, vet it, and go, that is a phenomenal process to add, and then we, behind the scenes, add it into different processes, different plans, different procedures.
So that the next time out, the people that still have those great intentions have a little bit more, better toolbox to work with then.
Correct. There's a great quote that John Maxwell, he's an author that I tend to have gone to in the past. In every adversity, there's seeds of equal or greater benefit. And that's really true, that most people individually, personally, and professionally learn more from a mistake that might have been made than a success. So as long as that mistake isn't, something that's continual and costs somebody, their house, their life, mistakes are an opportunity to learn and to grow. So in those adversities are the times that we really come together and do most of our planning.
You told me earlier that there's a set of preparedness goals on almost an overarching scale that you're thinking about and trying to get everybody coordinated toward. What are those?
These came out of really 9/11, those lessons learned, and it's called the National Preparedness Goals. And out of the National Preparedness Goals, there's 5 mission areas, and those are the marching orders, the job descriptions of the emergency management coordinators. And the 5 mission areas are prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Now, within each of those 5 mission areas, larger jurisdictions have subject matter experts that just live in one of those mission areas. For example, recovery. They're hired to perform job duties that are about recovering after a natural or man-made disaster, and that's their job. It's all about recovery. Emergency management coordinators work in all 5 of those, and under those 5, we break them down into what's called the 32 core capabilities, and there's 32 overarching core capabilities that we need to have some level of understanding and some influence over within our respective regions. And then with those 32 core capabilities, there's a process called POETE, POETE. It's planning, it's organizing, it's equipping, it's training, and it's exercises. So as an example, when we go into an after-action review, we break all the lessons learned down. If there was a new process that needs to be developed, or a new, something needed to occur differently, it's either planning needs to be different, organization, equipment, training, or exercises. So that POETE element falls to those 32 core capabilities under those 5 mission areas. So it's a big lift. You asked me, one of the challenges with being an emergency manager, it's not being an expert in any one of those, but it's like having a huge big Rolodex and having lots of friends and influence and knowing who to call when a particular incident or crisis occurs.
So we get back to planning here. I just
back to planning.
imagine the work around the conference table, on the phone, among people to come up with this structure that you've just described. Isn't perfect, probably evolving all the time, but trying to put it in place so that contingencies can at least be addressed.
Correct.
With something that's already been thought about.
Right. Right.
What draws a person to this kind of work?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, without sounding too out there, I feel like I'm called to be an emergency manager. I'm called to do what I'm supposed to be doing, where I'm supposed to be doing it, with the people I'm supposed to be doing it with and for, and at this time. And if you think about it, sheriff's departments, law enforcement, highway patrol, fire agencies, fire departments, fire districts, EMS, they're all type A personalities. They're all extreme hard chargers. And now you introduce, emergency management into the mix, and we have to walk a thin line. We're certainly never telling fire how to put a fire out, or law how to arrest a bad guy. But as we stand back and see those two agencies, we might have a little bit of a different lens, a little bit different perspective. But it's in all how we communicate that perspective and influence those top leaders to potentially look inside and possibly make some internal changes based on influence, experience, history, and that all comes with some bumps and bruises and some trials and tribulations.
You have to establish your credibility with some people as the hard chargers, but some of them are elected.
Correct.
Some of them have been on the job for 40 years.
Correct.
Did it just like their dad and their grandfather did before them. This is how we do things.
Yes.
And here comes Lenny in. Any particular training that you've had that helps you go down those roads?
Well, I feel that every job that I've ever had, every position that I've ever held has led me to becoming emergency management, because it's all about influence, it's all about relationships, it's about seeing potentially a bigger picture, but then also being resilient and confident enough to share an idea and be told that won't work here, and to understand that maybe they're right and potentially they are, and then to find a different way to either package it, communicate about it, or just go back to the drawing board and go, they're absolutely right. Where did I err? So it's very humbling, and it's also extremely rewarding. And anybody that is looking at emergency management that wants to get the kudos, the recognitions, the fame, should not go into emergency management, because we do our best work when we are behind the scenes, supporting, coordinating, and then we make our frontline, the star of the show, which they are. They're putting their life on the lines to save that family, to pull that flood victim out, to do that rescue. We're behind the scenes, just giving them the tools that they need when they need it.
You mentioned, without getting into specifics, an occasion fairly recently where something like this kind of happened, where lots of things had to come together right to get the outcome that we wanted, and you became aware that some of the higher-ups didn't really even understand what the role of emergency management even had been.
Right.
And you weren't standing up there saying, hey, look at me, everybody, but
right.
Would have been kind of nice, at least if there was an understanding,
right,
that you and your people
yes,
in your occupation were there, making a big difference.
For sure, and it's one of those fine lines again, that kind of that dichotomy is that as we report to our elected officials or our agencies specific that those EMs report to, that there's an awareness across Wyoming, which is one of the missions I have for being president of WAHA, is to be able to paint those stories that when there's a success, that success gets translated across the state. Yeah. And then we also have an awareness that behind the scenes, there's an incredible workforce that has been activated to provide support and coordination. And it's a dichotomy because in no way do I want to try to push emergency management out to be the face of any of those things, but an awareness across the state that emergency management is an essential tool and that we're behind the scenes. Probably every event that requires more than one agency being responded to anywhere in Wyoming, there's an emergency management coordinator somewhere in a room providing sit reps, providing spot weather forecasts, providing resource requests, providing information from the IC directly to elected officials so that the IC can maintain, his or her focus. So there's an incredible value that's being done. And just that awareness is something that I'm passionate about, helping everybody in Wyoming or more know in Wyoming that it's occurring.
Yeah, and a part of it certainly is recognizing the individuals. So many of these people doing this work are volunteers.
They are.
Gosh, that's just, that's something that has to be known virtually everywhere. But also this recognition for people that control funding, for example. You need to know, well, there's what the Emergency Management Office did.
Right.
And they need the sufficient budget, they need sufficient staff, they need sufficient facilities.
For sure.
And if nobody knows what they're doing, then it's harder to make that case all of a sudden. What do you mean you need money? Well, it helps them pay attention before we get to that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be a prophet in your own homeland. And that's one of the benefits of WAHA is that I can sound the horn and share the praise for all the great work that's being done in some of the other counties, and that association can address and communicate some of the successes that are occurring in carbon, and it just makes it makes it more real and brings it down home.
Well, that coronavirus pandemic really opened a lot of people's eyes, and has changed a lot of things permanently.
I think it changed a lot of things, and not all for the good. One of the things that it opened up was this whole idea of virtual meetings, which can be a good thing. Virtual meetings can be a good thing, but it's an easy trap to fall into. And when we're talking about true planning and as far as emergency management, and we think a virtual meeting can add that value, what we're more focused on is the end product, that 3-ring binder that's sitting on the shelf, as opposed to those two individuals sitting at the table face to face, getting to know each other's temperaments, getting to know each other's experience. So when that bad day happens, they're not meeting for the first time. And that's really, really, really difficult to do over a Teams or a Zoom's call.
Yeah. Is your job ever finished?
It never, absolutely.
I don't think so.
No, it never is.
When you mentioned 9/11, we mentioned the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
We probably both know sitting here, something's coming. That'll be a huge defining event as well.
Right.
And you'll be ready for it.
I believe that the state will be ready for it. I think Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, in partnership with the emergency managers through WAHA, we always say that it's not a matter of if that bad day comes, it's when. Yeah. There's an open door, open invitation. Reach out, find out who your county emergency management coordinator is, find their name, their number, their email, reach out to him or her, ask how you could potentially help and support that coordinator, either as a volunteer or as a resident that can better prepare themselves for the times that are coming. Yeah. And either one of those is an incredible value back to the emergency management program.
People, I'm afraid, too often have this worry or sense that they're somehow intruding or imposing on this person. This is someone who's going to be glad to take that call, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what we find is that in all of our communities, there's, I believe there's a really an untapped resource.
Yeah.
And it's our phenomenal retired individuals,
Interesting.
men and women, whether it's from law enforcement, from military, from school districts, that when crisis comes, not if, but when, they want to be able to help.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to sit back. They want to be able to help. And one of the best ways that they can help in the blue sky is reach out to your emergency manager. And there's lots of different programs that we have, whether it's potentially staffing an emergency operations center, potentially staffing a shelter, potentially running logistics around the county, food, water. There's just a huge amount of work that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And who better to do it than the folks that live in that affected area, so that not only can they help, but they feel that they are helping. And chances are they're not going to be able to put on a uniform and go arrest somebody, or put on bunker gear and go put out a fire. But emergency management has lots of plates that are spinning, and their expertise, their seasoned work in whatever profession they come from, is needed, and emergency management can use them for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Well,
Glad
thank
you're
you.
in Wyoming, traveling, conferring, planning,
Yes,
and for the state of Wyoming, the better for it.
I appreciate the kind words.
Lenny Layman, Wyoming All Hazards Association President. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us on Wyoming Chronicle.